Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for your attendance. We will now begin our closing ceremony. We kindly ask you to please take your seats. Thank you very much for your attendance. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all at the closing ceremony of the Korea Global Adaptation Week 2023. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Cho Ju-yeon, and it is indeed an honor to be your host at the closing ceremony of the Korea Global Adaptation Week 2023. Allow me to introduce myself in the Korean traditional way. As you may all know, the Korea Global Adaptation Week is an international event on adaptation to climate change, hosted by the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat, the United Nations Environment Program, the Asia Pacific Adaptation Network, the Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change of Korea Environment Institute, and Incheon Metropolitan City. And this year, the event was notably accompanied by various conferences, including the Regional NAP Expo for Asia and the Pacific, and the 8th Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum, and the Global Adaptation Dialogue. And these gatherings brought together high-level officials and experts, fostering vibrant exchanges of knowledge and information on adaptation. We do sincerely hope that all of our distinguished guests and participants have had a wonderful stay here in Incheon and, of course, the rest of South Korea as well. Well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, first, let's welcome Ms. Inger Lacour Anderson, UNEP's Secretary General, who will be speaking on the urgency of transformative climate action. And with that, we'd like to give a big round of applause and welcome her on stage. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Well, thank you so much for that kind welcome. And let me start out by saying what a pleasure it is to be in this beautiful country, welcomed so warmly by so many friends and so many partners. And so I'd like to give my deep thanks to the Ministry of Environment and to everyone who has been so deeply involved in this important meeting. The Adaptation Week is important. Why? Because we are living in a climate-changing world, and because we are understanding that unless we come together around adaptation, we will not succeed. And so this 8th Asia-Pacific Climate Adaptation Network Forum is absolutely critical in this regard. Because the impacts we are seeing of climate change are already ferocious. In fact, they're already relentless, and I'm sad to say they're already deadly. I witnessed this recently when I had the opportunity to visit Raipur district in Pakistan in February. 6 months after the floods, there was no drinking water, there were no health facilities, there were no schools, and for those people, it wasn't climate change that's somewhere out in the distance. It was reality, and it was climate catastrophe. And catastrophe is unfortunately becoming more and more apparent and more common for so many people in the world, including in this beautiful country. I had the opportunity to speak just last week with the Canadian Minister of Climate Change, and he said, "Who thought that Canadians would be climate refugees?" But they are. And so the reality is that we need to find solution in this region and beyond, because we understand that production of stable crops will decrease at every fraction of a degree of heating and warming. And we understand that the GDP could fall by 3% by 2050 in this region if we do not take action. So as I told policymakers in China earlier this week, climate change is the challenge of our times. Climate change cannot be lost in competition between countries, in economic woes, in different other crises that will come knocking on humanity's door. Climate change cannot put on the to-do list for later, because climate change will not wait. We don't have the luxury of time, and the world needs to show leadership absolutely now. The impacts are with us now, and vulnerable people and vulnerable communities and vulnerable nations need our help now. That's why your discussions are so important, because they can help accelerate action. They can help with your cross-cutting focus on gender, on social inclusion. That strikes at the very heart of climate justice. The poor and the disenfranchised, as I said, suffer the most, and amongst these groups, women most frequently bear the heaviest burdens. So friend, as I see it, there are some key takeaways from this forum that could ramp up action, and I see 4 that I'd like to speak to. The first takeaway that I have is that we have to look at traditional knowledge in the science policy interface and in ecosystem restoration and management. The truth is that our forefathers and foremothers knew about how to manage change and how weather-related catastrophe could be managed. And it was not always with concrete. It was with infrastructure from nature. It was by being smart about wetlands. And for centuries, indigenous people and local communities have managed their lands in greater harmony with nature. They are the best and strong stewards for our lands and our biodiversity, and they have a lot of knowledge that we have kind of forgotten as we have become so modern and so urbanized. And yet we have kind of overlooked the indigenous people and local communities, so we need to go back. My grandmother would tell us all, because she came from the northern part of Norway, that if you take the little trees, which are very small when you are in north of the polar circle, and you pull them down, you will have landslides. This was what she knew. But we have taken those trees and we farm on those slopes, and then the terrible things happen with these rainfalls that we get landslides. So let's go back to some of that knowledge that we know we need to take this. We saw, for example, in Fiji, where indigenous and traditional knowledge was used as part of an ecosystem restoration and assessment, adaptation assessment, to determine exactly, so which native species could reduce coastal erosion and flooding. We need more of this, please. So that's my first point. My second point is that we need to rethink our food systems so that we can protect livelihoods and food security. Now, the Food Systems Summit, a stock-taking moment, hosted earlier this year by our friends in the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, reminded us what we need to transform in the food systems to reduce emissions, to reduce land conversion from virgin land to agricultural land, to reduce ecosystem pollution, and to build resilience to climate impacts. There are many ways to do this. Adopting regenerative agriculture and conservation-oriented farming, refocusing the subsidies that today degrade lands because they incentivize farmers to do the wrong things, restoring landscapes and soils to avoid the conversion of virgin ecosystems and buffer climate impacts. This is what we are seeing, for example, in Pakistan's Living Indus initiative as being the vision. Gender equality, as I mentioned, has to be on the forefront, and women, where they do not, have to have land tenure and land rights. Because it's only when you have land and property in your name that you can get a loan in the bank. And when you have a loan in the bank, you can invest money in security. If you have nothing, you have nothing. And so we cannot have that half of the civilization does not have access to these resources, and so that is very critical. Early warning is very critical too. With the right data, nations can prepare and communities can act ahead of the catastrophe. in some of these catastrophic rainfalls and fires that we have had, there's been the conversation, why wasn't there enough warning? Let's be sure that those communities that do not have access can get access. And that is why we at UNEP are very proud to work with the Systematic Observation Financing Facility and implementing something very important, specifically in the Pacific, where we, with the support of the Green Climate Fund, are supporting these nations with strong early warning. We are helping, amongst others, East Timor build an early warning system and integrated that also in the Cook Islands, in Niue, in Palau, in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and in Tuvalu. So if we make such systems available and support and reform our food systems, we have a good chance. So that's my second point. My third point is that we need to climate-proof our cities and our infrastructure. We probably thought that our cities were already resilient enough. Who would have thought that the subway in Manhattan would become rivers? Who would have thought that the water from the sewers of Seoul would become flooded? No one, because we were not prepared for these kind of enormity of flash floods and rains. So we have to be aware that we need to climate-proof those densified areas, those areas where we are living densely, because that's where many of the deaths will happen. So we are drawn to cities and humanities like moths to the lamp. We will all want to move to cities, not all, but many of us. And so we need to understand that there will be more people coming to more cities across the world. And that means that we need to think about how we secure these cities. And so we have to prioritize urban and peri-urban sustainability, agriculture, food security, livelihoods for the urban poor. And that means to look at everything from infrastructure to housing, etc. And the Urban Shift, which is a program that UNEP is privileged to run with partners, is working in this space. Urban Shift will host its first Asia Forum later this month in beautiful New Delhi, bringing together representatives from cities in India, China, and Indonesia, and international organizations, and the private sector. So that's my second point. Let's make sure we look at the urban side too. And my fourth point is, we have to deliver finance, but deliver that with the right frameworks. Everybody here knows that adaptation finance has drawn the shorter straw, that we need to up this amount of financing that goes to adaptation. And this resource has to come from a variety of sources. It will not come alone from the public purse. And it has to come through international and national frameworks, as well as community mobilization. This forum has discussed that, and here we see the complementarity between many of the conventions. We recently, in December, agreed on the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, and that is a building block in the pathway towards financing for resilience as well. But funding and frameworks on nature and climate require that focus on adaptation, have it fully reflected in the NDCs, and ensure that public financing can be an enabler by, for example, setting policies and price signals, by directing domestic budgets, flows, and adaptation finance through national development plans, and by redirecting subsidies from climate damaging and nature damaging practices towards nature enhancing and climate enhancing practices. And the private sector, yep, they have to play their part too. And they must look at nature as being an asset on the balance sheet, not as being some side dimension into which effluence and pollution can be cast. And so looking at that, and that's why the task force on nature-related disclosures, financial disclosures, is doing such an important job to help companies. They understand today how to disclose their carbon related disclosures, but they are yet to learn how to disclose their nature-related disclosures. But the disclosure paradigm and construct is in beta testing now with hundreds of companies and will soon roll out. And I very much hope that many countries and many companies will take it on board. And of course, innovative financing has to be just. We have to understand that right now there is negotiations in the Dominican Republic on the loss and damage fund. It's happening as we speak. And in the upcoming COP, we absolutely need to find agreement on the structure and the way in which that fund gets operational. The UN Secretary General, my boss, Antonio Guterres, has made it very clear we should tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies and divert those monies to countries suffering from loss and damage. So friends, we could talk about adaptation for a long time, but I need to stop here. What I ask of you now is, as the practitioners that you are, take forward what you have learned in this forum and what you have exchanged and in this forum and in the Climate Week. And we at UNEP, I promise you, we will do the very same. As the COP28 Director General Ambassador Majid Al-Suwadi said in the Korea Global Adaptation Week, adaptation and resilience will be very high on the agenda at COP28. And this is, of course, something that we celebrate. UNEP will take what we have learned and what the entire set of colleagues have learned from this forum, and we will take this to the COP. And we will remind negotiators that the Paris Agreement is not just a piece of paper that we celebrated that night in 2015 when the gavel went down and we waved it in the air. The Paris Agreement is lives. The Paris Agreement is security. The Paris Agreement is finance. And the Paris Agreement is climate justice. And it was a promise, therefore, in Paris to deliver to billions of people who are facing these impacts, a climate hell, to protect them, to be there for them, that this one global community would not let them down, because at the end of the day, no country is an island. We are on this one planet together, and we have to live as one family. And so it is time to keep that promise and deliver climate justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Inger Lacour Andersen, for your soft but powerful call to action that we must act now. Thank you very much, and thank you for your 4 key takeaways as well. And she mentioned that we did discuss a wide range of activities as well as discussion topics over the last week. And so in order to jog your memory, we have put together a highlight video of all of the activities that you have been doing over the past week. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask for you to please turn your attention to the screen for the video. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that wide range of activities and the video to jog your memory. So now let us invite some co-organizers of each event for the presentations on the outcome of the Korea Global Adaptation Week 2023. And first and foremost, allow me to invite Dr. Lee Hyung-sup, the Deputy Director General for the International Cooperation Bureau at the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Lee Hyung-sup. I am Deputy Director General of International Cooperation Bureau of the Ministry of Environment. Today I will be sharing with you the key takeaways and exchanges from the Global Adaptation Dialogue and that took place on Wednesday. So with 3 months left until COP28, we had the opportunity to engage in an open dialogue under the theme of a new era for adaptation on the expected outcomes from the GGA framework, accelerating formulation and implementation of national adaptation plans or NAPs, primary barriers to implementation, and recommendations for COP28. The slide shows the esteemed high-level officials who participated in the event. In opening and congratulatory remarks, Vice Minister Im Sang-jun urged adaptation actions for the future generations. As UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon underlined the significance of expediting adaptation and the reality of climate change. And COP28 Director General Majid Al-Suwaidi said the GGA framework should strengthen resilience for vulnerable populations. During the panel discussion, moderated by Associate Professor Park Ju-young from Seoul National University, GCF's Executive Director, Substar, and SBI chairs leading the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program, and representatives from Australia and Indonesia exchanged views on 4 pre-shared questions based on their deep expertise in this area. Now the key takeaways. First, regarding the expected outcomes of the GGA framework, we agree that it is imperative to transition towards transformative adaptation and implement the GGA framework at COP28. A collective understanding among all parties was highlighted in deciding the specifics, and therefore unity is essential. Second, we focus on the strategies to assist the developing countries in establishing national adaptation plans. The importance of adequate funding and better accessibility was recognized. We also emphasized the need to raise awareness, share best practices, and transfer technology to ensure effective adaptation. Third, we discussed that finance, technology, and capacity building are crucial for expanding the implementation of adaptation. Especially mobilizing private finance is important. We also stressed the importance of making these elements more accessible, available, and predictable through solidarity. Involving social communities in developing and implementing practical adaptation measures was also noted. Lastly, regarding the message for COP28, we expressed the hope for commitments that drive change and investment in order to expand adaptation efforts. Some stressed that all adaptation actions must focus on transformation and that climate change is a reality. At the Q&A session, a young participant asked about the role of youth in bridging the gap between views of developing and developed countries. In response, one of the panelists emphasized that young people, regardless of their nationality, shared a unified voice on climate-related concerns. Therefore, their voice should be regarded at a global level. Regarding youth involvement in developing NAPs, the panelists from Indonesia and Australia responded that various stakeholders are engaged in NAP formulation and their creative ideas are very useful. They also said various stakeholders are participating in the entire NAP process, ultimately contributing to mainstreaming adaptation. We should deliver an ambitious and forward-looking global stocktake outcome at COP28. Also, we must develop a robust GGA framework that can steer towards a transformative path away from the business as usual. We witnessed our desire for all of this. We will share the outcomes of the discussions with the global community to contribute to making substantial agreements and progress at COP28. Thank you.
Please give our Deputy Director General, Dr. Lee Hyung-seop, another big round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Lee Hyung-seop, for your informative outcome presentation. Thank you. Now, moving on, we will have a next presentation on the outcomes of the Regional NAP Expo for Asia and the Pacific, the Resilience Frontiers Working Session, the Adaptation Committee Workshop, the Indigenous Values for Transformational Adaptation. So for this, let me invite Mr. Mosome Malejane from the team leader, the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, the NAP Unit, the National Adaptation Plan Unit, Adaptation Division of the UNFCCC, to the stage. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Master of Ceremony, thank you very much for the invitation. And once again, I express our sincere gratitude to the government of Korea for hosting this important event here in Korea. So I will provide some quick highlights on what we captured as the key takeaways from the 4 of the 5 events that you mentioned that we had in the week. I will go straight ahead into the key takeaways. First of all, and I think as my predecessor spoke, 2023 is an important year for adaptation for several reasons. First of all, we are working towards the articulation of the global goal on adaptation, which we hope that parties will agree and define. With the global goal on adaptation articulated, it will give us a sense of direction, collective idea on where we channel our efforts together in terms of what we do on adaptation to climate change. That's the first point. The second point is that 2023 will be the first global stocktake under the UNFCCC process, where we will be looking at where we are, where we need to go, and what we need to do more. And this, again, is going to give us an opportunity to reflect in terms of what we need to do that we are not doing now. Also, another thing that came up importantly from our colleagues from the Green Climate Fund in the host city of Sondo is that the Green Climate Fund this year has adopted an updated strategic plan. And this strategic plan has a stronger focus on supporting the implementation of climate actions identified by the governments through their many instruments, the national determined contributions, national adaptation plans, and long-term strategies. The executive director just mentioned right now also that governments are also working on the loss and damage financing arrangements. So collectively, 2023 is an important year for us to reflect on how we can enhance our action and do better. The emerging climate change risks and the impacts demonstrate that we need new thinking and efforts on how we deal with adaptation. It is very clear from science, from the IPCC, that business as usual is no longer enough. It's not doing us any good. We need to think differently on how we implement adaptation. And this is one of the key messages that also resonated in the many sessions that we had. Right from how we implement adaptation, which we know is not adequate, all the way to how adaptation is being financed and resourced, we know that it's not adequate. We need to rethink how these are better financial flows for adaptation to really scale up action on adaptation. Another important aspect that came going down in my points, the third one, is that in adaptation, there is greater value in having integrated vulnerability assessments, going much more into the technical detail there, in terms of the assessments that would go and demonstrate how the climate impacts are impacting the society. Indeed, we are already seeing it with our eyes now, and that articulation, I think, is important as well in terms of also how do we communicate it to the stakeholders. Obviously, adaptation requires the action by all stakeholders. How do we best communicate to our leaders? How do we best communicate to the local communities to be able to take action that would inspire that? The other point is that long-term systems approach to adaptation is essential. The short-term quick fix of the hazards that are happening today is not going to take us very far, but we need to see how livelihoods, how people connect with nature, how can we live better with nature in the future in a way that we are reducing the impact that we are doing. In the previous years, recently when we were doing the land dialogue, I was leading the work where we were actually talking about the natural resilience, which actually elevates the significance and importance of living better with nature. And also the other important fact that came up is that coherence and synergy are key. Going down again in the elements is that there is a wealth of information that we already exist. We already have lots of practices on how adaptation is happening. We already have experience that has happened right from the local communities all the way to the governments, and we need to leverage on that, not as if we start from the beginning. And the other point is that everyone has a role to play, and this is the most important one, I think. When we look at the governments have a role to play to lead the direction and set the direction in terms of where we need to go. But the local communities as well, they are the ones that know what solutions will work and have worked over time. And they are the ones to define what needs to be done. The knowledge of indigenous peoples, we had an indigenous peoples dialogue and gallery. It demonstrated how the indigenous peoples possess and universally applicable knowledge and information that has worked over generations. How do we leverage and build on that? And also the private sector, most importantly, how do we make sure that the private sector is engaging, is taking action? Subnational authorities, financial institutions, everybody has a role to play in climate change adaptation. The importance of regional cooperation, and in fact, yesterday I had the privilege to sit with my colleagues when we were discussing about the outcomes of this event, and we're reflecting on the APAN Forum in itself, and also the whole Korea Global Adaptation Week here, how it is helping us come and share together regional cooperation and open the doors on how we can collaborate and cooperate together. And one speaker, one of the previous, they said, if you want to go far, we go together, but if you want to go faster, of course, you go alone. Regional cooperation will take us further in terms of where we want to go. And we need to strengthen systems for accessing finance. We know that we have a problem. One of the drivers for adaptation is the delivery of adequate financing. Unless we are able to accelerate how the local communities, or ensure how the local communities, the people where we need the resources at, are able to access those resources, it will always become difficult on how we deal with climate change. It is very important that we accelerate that. That's one of the strong messages that came. It can come with the many established institutions and mechanisms on how we do this, empowering the local communities. And also, many countries also express their technical needs. One thing that is important and is key is that countries know what are the entry points for the support. So if we want to support the countries, we have to ask, and then there will be support, a direction in terms of what support needs to be supported. Overall, one thing that I will also cover all these messages with is that, as also my predecessor, the president, just said, we need to accelerate the formulation and implementation of NAPs. Many of the things that I'm talking about here, if we do this properly and we reiterate, we do them well, we'll be able to cover all these elements that we are talking about that need to happen very well. We need to make progress in that. And this is my last bullet, but before I can end my talk, I will take this opportunity to convey the words of thanks to Deputy Minister Sang-hyun Lee from our Executive Secretary once again and the team in the government of Korea to thank you deeply and dearly for hosting us here in the Korea Global Adaptation Week for the many events that we led as the UNFCCC Secretariat. I also wish to especially thank my colleagues from UNEP, Executive Director, your team. We have been working very well together. We sincerely appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive and remarkable presentation. Thank you for the outcomes of the forum. And now, thank you very much. Moving on to our next presentation. Next, we'll have the presentation outcomes of the 8th Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum. And with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Mozaharul Aram, the Regional Coordinator of Climate Action, the head of the APAN Secretariat of UNEP, to the stage. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony. Excellencies, dear participants, very good afternoon. So, in terms of my presentation, is the key messages, all right. So let me start with a brief summary of the forum, what we have done. We have delivered 4 plenary sessions with the 24 distinguished speakers. We have organized 20 technical sessions under 4 streams and the 5 enablers. And the 4th stream that we covered here during the 8th forum is the resilience of food system, resilience of communities, and the resilience of the ecosystem and ecosystem services, and the resilience of infrastructure, cities, and settlement. In terms of the enablers, we covered the 5 areas. First is the policies, the second is the planning and the programming, science and assessment, the technologies and practices, and the last is very important, is the finance and the investment. Our last session was basically prior to this session, so it is very difficult for me to summarize everything that more than 120 speakers provided their inputs. But what I'm aiming is to summarize under the 3 main areas, and maybe what my predecessor 2 speakers mentioned, there will be many things common. So the first is the planning and implementation. What we have heard in the last 3 days under the APAN Forum, the region, we collectively made significant progress in planning and the target setting. But it is time-wise is very critical to move to the implementation. What we need to, throughout this, the pathway in terms of the adaptation planning and implementation is the inclusiveness and to build the resilience for all. And it's from the small island countries to the mountain communities. This includes recognizing the multi-layered marginalization and the putting them high on the agenda in our intervention. The current incremental, the adaptation, which drive the small-scale adjustment to the current system, is found to increase the cost and delay of the implementation of sustainable and the long-term solution. What we need is to challenge the status quo of the system and the way we are implementing the adaptation interventions. Let me move to the second area that came during our conversation is the system thinking and the nexus that we need to foster. The transformative adaptation in this discussion defined and characterized as being a system-wide and the restructuring issues. Although the impact of climate change are felt across the various sectors, but the siloed approach is still prevailing in almost every institutional framework and the organizational mandate. Therefore, a system thinking approach is necessary to foster the multi-stakeholder and the cross-sectoral collaboration. The interrelationship and the interdependencies exist within the system, for example, the agriculture, ecosystem, the communities. And that necessitates a system approach for building the resilience for all and avoiding the maladaptation in the long run. We also talked about the need of the nexus approach, such as the nexus between the adaptation and the loss and damage as a continuum, because it is very difficult to separate the adaptation and loss and damage. It is also important to utilize the nexus between the adaptation and the biodiversity, and through that nexus approach, we'll be able to maximize and optimize resources which are still limited for us. This requires to redefine the adaptation and issue of the continuum. Ladies and gentlemen, let me move to the last point, which is the adaptation financing. In the context of adaptation financing, the discussion was more towards the need of the transformation of the climate finance, not only to fill the gap, but also to scale up the adaptation intervention, and also the need highlighted the way we are financing, and it requires the restructuring. The climate change adaptation financing has also been mentioned is lagging behind, and we need to revisit the procedure and the practices for financing and exploring the new tools. For example, the microfinancing is needed to jumpstart the intervention needed to support the most vulnerable communities and least ready countries. So the development planning and the budgeting must integrate climate change adaptation, and public finance should be used collectively to leverage other finance sources, and also to more effectively target the finance to the local communities, which are the key actors as well as also the most vulnerable. And we also need support to build their resilience as well as helping the nations to meet their targets. Before I end, just for your information and further use, as I mentioned that we have worked in the 4 resilience stream. We have developed the resilience outlook, focusing on all the 4 streams and the systems. And these are available in our website. And we request you please make use of this, the resources and the knowledge, which is the compilation where we stand and what we need. Let me just end again thanking the government of Korea for hosting us here, as well as I mentioned that it is difficult for me to summarize everything, but we'll be putting together a comprehensive report and what we need to do as our next work. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mozaharu Alam, for your thought-provoking and very well-organized presentation. Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, next on our program is a very special award ceremony for the 2023 Climate Change Adaptation Illustration Contest. Well, the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea and the Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change of the Korea Environment Institute have jointly organized the 2023 Climate Change Adaptation Illustration Contest under the title of Climate Crisis: Survival Strategies for Humanity. And this was in a bid to engage the public in deliberating on ways to enhance awareness of the climate crisis, as well as to foster adaptation. And this 2023 Climate Change Adaptation Illustration Contest is the second iteration, and it builds on the success of last year's event. And this time around, it garnered significant interest as well as lots of enthusiasm, leading to the submission of a diverse array of 548 artworks. And to ensure a fair evaluation process, expert panels as well as a public review panel composed of members of the Adaptation Academy were formed. And through these assessments, a total of 57 outstanding artworks were ultimately selected. Today, in this audience, we have the grand prize winner among us and representatives among all the winners of the contest. So with that, I would like to start off the ceremony. So first, allow me to invite Dr. Lee Chang-hoon, the president of the Korea Environment Institute, to the stage to present the Excellence Prize. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. 네, 지금부터는 시상식을 위해서 구경문 병행 진행을 하도록 하겠습니다. So please allow me to conduct the award ceremony in both English and Korean. 네, 우수상을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 우수상은 총 6개 작품이 선정되었습니다. 아동 부문과 청소년 부문 대표 2분이 수상하도록 하겠습니다. A total of 6 works have been selected as Excellence Awards, and 2 representatives from the children's and youth categories will be awarded. 수상자는 아동 부문 우수상 김서빈 어린이, 청소년 부문 우수상 이정한 학생입니다. Please welcome Excellence Prize, Kim Seobin and Lee Jung-an. And please welcome them with a big round of applause. The winners, please come up to the stage. 네, 첫 번째 우수상 수상자입니다. 우수상 아동부 김서빈. 귀하는 환경부가 주최하는 2023년 기후위기 적응 그림 공모전에서 위와 같이 우수한 성적을 거두었으므로 이에 상장을 드립니다. 2023년 9월 1일 한국환경연구원장 이창훈 축하드립니다. Congratulations! 네, 많은 박수 부탁드립니다. A big round of applause please for our 7-year-old 김서빈. 네, 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 사진 촬영한 김서빈 어린이 잠시 옆으로 이동 부탁드립니다. 네, 축하드립니다. Congratulations to 김서빈. 네, 다음 우수상 청소년부 이정안 학생입니다. 우수상 청소년부 이정안. 이하 내용은 같습니다. 네, 축하드립니다. 두 분 진심으로 축하드립니다. Congratulations to both students. And now please pose for the photo. 같이 사진 촬영 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 축하드립니다. Congratulations. 네, 감사합니다. 시상을 위해서 수고해주신 이창훈 원장님 감사합니다. Congratulations to both and thank you for your hard work. 네, 원장님 다시 자리로 모시겠습니다. 네, 그럼 이어서 최우수상 시상을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. And next, the Best Excellence Prize will be presented. 시상은 환경부 장관님을 대신하여 이창흠 환경부 기후탄소 정책 실장님께서 수고해 주시겠습니다. On behalf of the Minister of the Ministry of Environment, Dr. Lee Chang-hoon, Deputy Minister of Climate Change and Carbon Neutral Policy Office, will present the prize. 네, 최우수상은 아동, 청소년, 일반 부문 각 1개씩 총 3개 작품이 선정되었습니다. 오늘 시상식에는 최우수상 수상자들을 대표하여 청소년 부문의 조예지 학생이 수상하도록 하겠습니다. A total of 3 pieces were selected for the Best Excellence Prize. On behalf of the 3 winners, 1 individual from the youth section will be receiving the prize today. Please welcome 조예지. A big round of applause, please. 최우수상 청소년부 조예지. 귀하는 환경부가 주최하는 2023년 기후위기 적응 그림 공모전에서 위와 같이 우수한 성적을 거두었으므로 이에 상장을 드립니다. 2023년 9월 1일 환경부 장관 한화진 축하드립니다. Congratulations. 네, 같이 사진 촬영 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 축하드립니다. Congratulations once again. 네, 수상자께서는 잠시 무대 위에서 대기 부탁드립니다. 네, 실장님께서는 잠시 다시 한번 수고해 주시겠습니다. 마지막으로 대상 시상이 있겠습니다. And lastly, the grand prize. 영예 대상 수상자입니다. 일반 부문의 최예린님입니다. The grand prize goes to 최예린. 무대 위로 모시겠습니다. Please welcome her on stage. 네, 대상 시상입니다. 대상 일반부 최예린. 귀하는 환경부가 주최하는 2023년 기후위기 적응 그림 공모전에서 위와 같이 우수한 성적을 거두었으므로 이에 상장을 드립니다. 2023년 9월 1일 환경부 장관 한화진 축하드립니다. Congratulations. And now the grand prize winner once again taking a photo. 네, 축하드립니다. 네, 이제 앞서 수고해주신 이창훈 원장님 다시 무대 위로 모시고 시상자와 수상자들의 단체 기념사진 촬영하도록 하겠습니다. And now we'll proceed on with the group photo all together with the prize presenters and recipients. 네, 축하드립니다. 다 같이 사진 촬영 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 다시 한번 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. A big round of applause, please. 네, 축하드립니다. 이제 시상해 주셨던 분들은 이제 자리로 모시겠습니다. 감사합니다. 네, 저희가 수상 소감을 한번 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 제가 무대로 잠시 중앙으로 이동하면서 옆으로 잠시 이동 부탁드리고요. 먼저 저희 이정한 학생 부탁드리겠습니다. 안녕하세요. 앞으로 모시겠습니다. 우수상을 탄 이정한 학생인데요.
네.
혹시 소감 좀 부탁드려도 될까요? 제가 그림을 한번 봤는데 너무나도 멋진 작품이었습니다. 축하드립니다.
감사합니다.
네, 어떤 생각을 가지고 그림을 그렸는지 좀 부탁드려도 될까요?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jong-an Lee, and I'm a freshman at Yangji Middle School in Sejong-si. I am very happy to receive this award. 제가 그린 그림의 제목은 기후위기 시대 적응을 위한 신도시 건설입니다. 그림을 그리기 시작했을 때 가장 집중했던 부분은 요즘 사회에서 많이 발생하는 플라스틱으로 어떻게 기후위기를 표현할 수 있을까였습니다. 그래서 도시 자체를 커다란 플라스틱으로 표현해 보았고, 도시 안에서는 구역을 여러 가지로 나누어 사람들이 친환경적으로 생각할 수 있도록 꾸미는 등 기후위기에 적극적으로 대응하는 방안을 고민하였습니다. 첫 번째 구역은 주거시설로 리피샵, 에코샵, 비건 식당 등 친환경 생각을 조성하였습니다. 두 번째는 이런 주거시설을 운영하기 위하여 조력 및 풍력 발전을 설치하는 등 친환경적 에너지를 공급할 수 있도록 하였습니다. 마지막으로 도시에서 소비되는 농축산을 공급하기 위해 도시에 인접한 지역에 새로운 농업지대를 만들어 생산 및 유통에서 발생하는 오염을 줄일 수 있는 방안을 표현하고자 하였습니다. 다시 한번 2023년 기후위기 적응 그림 공모전에서 우수상을 주셔서 감사합니다.
네, 다시 한번 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 굉장히 전략적으로 또 도시들이 앞으로 어떻게 적응을 할 수 있는지 구역을 또 나눠서 이렇게 그림을 그렸는데요. 힌트를 얻거나 아니면 어떤 다른 데서 영감을 받은 게 있을까요?
옛날에 많이 책에서 보았던 모습들을 상상해서 구현한 것도 있었습니다.
굉장히 다양한 곳에서 영감을 얻었는 것 같은데요. 다시 한번 축하드리겠습니다.
감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 자리로 모시겠습니다. 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 그럼 이번에는 최우수상 수상을 한 학생을 모셔보도록 하겠습니다. 조예진님 모셔볼게요. 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 안녕하세요. 다시 한번 축하드리겠습니다. 그림이 너무나도 멋지고 또 굉장한 디테일을 포함을 하고 있었는데요. 어떤 생각을 가지고 그림을 그렸는지 좀 설명 부탁드릴게요.
기후위기의 원인 중 하나는 생태계 파괴입니다. 제 그림을 보시면 루빅 큐브를 볼 수가 있는데요. 이는 우리 생태계를 루빅 큐브에 빗대어 표현한 것입니다. 루빅 큐브를 풀어내려면 엄청나게 많은 노력이 필요합니다. 저는 우리가 루빅 큐브를 풀어내는 것처럼 인간이 기후위기에 적응하기 위해 생태계 문제 해결 방법을 찾을 수 있을 거라고 생각합니다. 저는 그림을 통해 사람들이 생태계 파괴 원인을 파악하고 이 문제에 대한 의식을 높일 수 있도록 돕고 싶었습니다. 감사합니다.
실제로 저걸 잘 푸나요?
아니요.
그래서 꼬여있는 그런 문제를 해결하는 것처럼 뭔가 기후위기에 대해서 적응을 한다, 이런 발상이었을까요?
네.
근데 디테일이 굉장히 많이 들어있거든요. 어디에서 영감을 얻었는지 혹시 질문을 할 수 있을까요?
저는 하나하나 다 일상적인 요소에서 얻어와가지고 사람들이 최대한 많은 공감할 수 있도록 하기 위해서 구체적으로 파다 보니까 그렇게 디테일해진 것 같습니다.
앞으로도 기후 적응 노력을 더 많이 하실 수 있기를 기대하겠습니다. 다시 한번 축하드리겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다. 박수 부탁드려요. 네. 그러면 이번에는 대상을 탔던 분을 한번 모셔보도록 하겠습니다. 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 안녕하세요. 이번에는 좀 그림과는 다른 일러스트 작품을 해주셨는데요. 좀 설명 부탁드리겠습니다.
우선 이렇게 큰 상을 받게 해주셔서 정말 감사합니다. 저는 이번 공모전을 준비하면서 기후위기에 대해서는 알고 있었지만 기후위기 적응에 대해서는 사람들의 인식이 아직 부족하다는 것을 느꼈습니다. 그리고 우리가 미처 관심을 가지지 못하는 부분에서 사람, 동물, 식물의 기후 적응을 위한 노력이 이루어지고 있다는 것을 알게 되었습니다. 그러한 노력들 위해 급격하게 변한 기후에 적응하며 살아가고 있다는 것을 누구나 알 수 있도록 직관적인 일러스트로 표현하고자 하였습니다. 앞으로는 더 많은 사람들이 다양한 방면에서 이루어지고 있는 기후위기 적응에 대해 지속적으로 관심을 가지고 그러한 노력들이 꾸준히 이어지길 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
네, 박수 부탁드립니다. 사실 너무나도 직관적이면서 또 기후 적응을 위해서는 어떤 노력이 필요한지 굉장히 또 우리 시대에 맞는 그런 일러스트인 것 같아요. 앞으로도 일러스트레이터로서 기후 적응을 위해서 더 많은 노력을 해주시길 바라겠습니다. 감사합니다. 네, 축하드립니다. 네, 다시 한번 모든 수상자들을 위해서 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 감사합니다. 이렇게 보시면서 느끼셨겠지만 굉장히 훌륭한 작품들이 수상을 했습니다. As you may have seen, I believe that all of our awardees were very impressive. And this concludes our awards ceremony. I believe that you were very impressed with all of the drawings as well as the illustrations. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to listen to some of the farewell remarks from the representatives of each organization that contributed to the successful hosting of our event. So first, please welcome Dr. Kim Chul-soo from the General Director of the Environment Bureau of the Incheon Metropolitan City, our host city. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
네, 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 인천시 환경국장 김철수입니다. 우선 이번 2023 UN 기후변화 협약 적응 주간을 이런 행사를 성공적으로 개최해 주신 UNFCCC와 UNEP 그리고 환경부와 한국환경연구원에게 감사를 드립니다. 또한 74개 국가에서 참여해 주신 정부와 학계 그리고 국제기구 관계자분들께 진심으로 감사하다는 말씀을 드립니다. 이곳 인천 송도는 여러분들도 잘 아시겠지만 대한민국 최고의 경제 자유구역으로 성장을 하고 있고 최근 IPCC가 지구 평균온도 1.5도를 채택한 도시이기도 합니다. 그리고 2019년도에 올해와 같이 적응 주간 행사를 개최한 도시이기도 합니다. 이런 의미 있는 도시에서 전 지구적인 기후 위기 적응 의제를 새롭게 논의하는 그 시작점에서 우리 인천시가 기여할 수 있도록 기회를 주신 데에 대해서 감사하게 생각을 하고요. 특히 이번 일주일 동안 전 세계가 주목하고 있는 기후변화 적응을 대해서 국가별 적응 계획과 그리고 이행 협력 방안 그리고 재원과 적응 방안에 이르기까지 국제사회의 논의를 이끌어낸 점은 큰 의미가 있다고 하겠습니다. 또한 다가오는 11월에는 아랍에미리트에서 개최되는 COP28에서 이번에 논의된 결과를 함께 공유하고 그리고 진전 있는 논의가 지속되기를 기대하겠습니다. 앞으로도 우리 인천시는 2045년 탄소 중립이라는 목표 달성을 위해 적극적으로 노력할 것은 물론이고요. 기후 적응 회복력을 강화하고 그리고 지속 가능한 지구촌을 만드는데 국제사회 일원으로서 책임을 다하겠다는 약속을 드리고 다시 한번 2023 UN 기후변화 적응 주간 행사를 위해 참석해 주신 모든 분들께 감사를 드리고 이곳 인천에서 좋은 기억과 행복한 추억을 가득 가지시고 돌아가시길 바라겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you once again, Dr. Kim, for your considerate farewell remarks, and thank you to Incheon Metropolitan City for being our gracious hosts throughout the week. And now let us invite Dr. Lee Chang-hoon, the president of the Korea Environment Institute, for his farewell remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Ms. Inga Anderson, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of the UN Environment Program. Mr. Lee Chang-hoon, Deputy Minister of Korean Ministry of Environment. Mr. Kim Chol-soo, Director General of Environmental Bureau, Incheon Metropolitan City. Distinguished guests and participants, it's been a great honor to work with the Ministry of Environment, the Republic of Korea, the United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change Secretariat, the United Nations Environment Program, and the Incheon Metropolitan City to co-organize this significant event. In the past 5 days, over 700 people from 62 countries have participated and discussed the theme, A New Era for Adaptation, Scaling Up and Transformation in Adaptation, through 29 different programs. We've been talking about how to make adaptation efforts bigger and better, changing the way we usually approach it. Even though we have a long way to go, this conference marks the beginning of our new journey. During the Korea Global Adaptation Week 2023, the Korea Local Declaration on Climate Adaptation has been held. Almost all of Korea's local government, 234 of 243, took part and showed their strong commitment to adaptation. Climate change adaptation is no longer the exclusive domain of experts. It's a matter deeply rooted in the concerns of our communities and citizens, including local community. I believe that each of you who attended this conference has discovered valuable insight into scaling up and transformation in adaptation through your participation in meetings, exhibitions, and networking sessions. As we return to your respective countries, I hope you will apply your newfound knowledge and contribute to ushering in this new era for adaptation on the grounds you serve. I wish you all of you safe journey back home. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Dr. Lee, for your farewell remarks. Thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, let me invite Dr. Lee Chang-hum, Deputy Minister of Climate Change and Carbon Neutral Policy Office from the Ministry of Environment, for his closing remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Excellencies, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, this place we are sitting together is quiet, peaceful, safe, and a bit pious. However, at this moment, on the other side of small Korean peninsula, many Koreans are worried about damage and losses due to heavy rainfall and frequent typhoons. This year, we have experienced unprecedented drought, flood, wildfires, and heat waves. It was a moment to witness climate crisis. This is why we gather here this week, and we must continue to meet and respond in a cooperative manner. This week's event is also part of the journey. I believe it has been a very vibrant and productive week for all of us. Regarding the successful completion of this meaningful event, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our colleagues from UNFCCC, UNEP, Incheon Metropolitan City, Korean Environment Institute, and Ministry of Environment of Korea for their dedicated efforts for this year's Global Adaptation Week. For the past week, we had nearly 1,000 participants from countries. We delivered more than 300 presentations for 29 programs and 76 sessions. Throughout those sessions, once again, we were reminded of the urgency of climate crisis and the importance of global solidarity to achieve the global goal on climate adaptation. During the first half of the work week, at the Regional NAP Expo organized by the UNFCCC, we shared our knowledge and experiences in establishing NAPs and achieving the adaptation goal. During the second half of the week, at the Climate Change Adaptation Forum organized by the UNEP, we exchanged our views on how to improve adaptation governance and build climate resilience in food system, ecosystem services, communities, infrastructure, and human settlement. Government officials, researchers, civil activities, business leaders, and the youth have come together, showing such an impressive enthusiasm in discussing various climate-related issues at all levels. Lastly, the Global Adaptation Dialogue hosted by the Ministry of Environment of Korea has provided a platform to demonstrate the latest progress on the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program over the past 2 years. Excellencies, the Korean Global Adaptation Week have become one of the most important annual events on adaptation. This largest event solely focused on adaptation. The week engages all relevant stakeholders from government, international organizations, civil society, public institutions, businesses, and the youth. Such diverse participation enables us to build a robust and broad network that will help us deliver innovative adaptation solutions. Indeed, I hope this year's Global Adaptation Week has offered us an opportunity to take a step closer to achieving the global goal on climate adaptation. I'm also certain what has been discussed during this week will send a strong message for COP28 in Dubai, serving as the momentum to deliver for the global discussions on adaptation. Once again, let me thank UNFCCC, UNEP, all the speakers and the participants for your attendance. I wish this week has been a pleasant and insightful time for all of us. Furthermore, I am confident that voices, suggestions, and the promises we have delivered throughout this week will be a valuable asset for the success of COP28. I wish all of you safely return to your place with hope. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your heartfelt closing remarks. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, this marks the conclusion of our closing ceremony for the Korea Global Adaptation Week 2023. Once again, I'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to all of you who have stayed until the very end of our week, and to thank you for enjoying the week throughout. I hope that the past 5 days of the Korea Global Adaptation Week 2023 have served as a significant forum for all of you for meaningful discussions on effective climate change adaptation solutions. And may you please take home fond memories. And as we have said throughout, no country is an island, and in that vein of thought, so please come back sooner rather than later, and please consider Korea your second home. With that, please travel back home safely, and we will close this closing ceremony. Thank you very much. 고맙습니다.